All right.
I'd say there's no amount of BBL you can get, but there is.
Yeah.
There is.
But then you go too far. Some people go too far.
Mhm.
Some people go
That's
too
how it
far.
goes. Well, you didn't go very far. You went down an hour and a half to Eugene.
I did. Yeah. I was down at the spring game on Saturday, and we talked a little bit about it with Molden when he was in here, and Alex was down there with his son, Josiah, who plays at West Lynn. And, we were talking with him before we went on the air. I was like, could you imagine what that would have been like when you were playing? He's like, no, man. Like, he goes, that was crazy. And I got to the stadium at 9:30 in the morning. And when I pulled up, there were already cars lining up all the way back to like Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard to get into the tailgate lots. And they didn't open until 10. And 40,000 people.
It's a lot of people.
I mean, there may have been more. It really was. It was just the corners of the stadium that were not there. And it's great that the fans show up for that, but it's also because it is actually a spring game, which is what people are not doing anymore. And it was real football. But I still approach it as what it is, which is a spring game. And people want to make sweeping generalizations or have hot takes about what the actual roster is going to be like. I think that is a fool's game, especially in the spring, even with the quarterback position, where I thought all of the quarterbacks actually made a play at one point where I was like, oh, okay. Dante Moore had a couple of beautiful deep balls. One was converted. A couple of them weren't. Austin Novosad did the exact same thing. I thought Akili Smith Jr. for his first time coming out on the field, he showed exactly why he was a highly touted prospect. But the reality of it is that people want to look at it and they'll go through the entirety of the game and fail to realize that the offensive lines are mismatched. And there isn't a team in the country that is 10 or 12 deep on the offensive line. And that's what you do when you split your rosters evenly. You have got a mismatch of offensive linemen. I think that the starting five are going to be really good. The depth is going to be there. To what degree, I don't know on the offensive line. But I think what really popped to me was how good that defensive line is going to be. You lose Jordan Birch, Derek Harmon, Jamari Caldwell. And that group did shine. I think the other group that did is the receiving core is stacked. I mean, from Decorian Moore, who his imprint was felt on the very first possession where he caught a deep ball. And then, Dylan Gresham had a phenomenal game. Jeremiah McClellan, he was a guy that he was a
stood out
4-star prospect. He had a really good spring for Oregon. And then you add in guys like Evan Stewart, who was suited up, did not play in the game. Kyler Casper, who's going to be out there. Justice Lowe, who got significant run in this offense. They are going to be deep at receiver. They're deep at running back, and nobody really popped off the field in that running back room. But they have variety, and they have a lot of counter punches that they can throw at you. I think the biggest thing that was visible was the defensive backs. They changed the way that room looks, and they're long. They are a lot longer than they were last year. A lot of guys over 6 foot, but a lot of guys over 6'2" in that secondary room. And they got 21 defensive backs. I thought guys like Dylan Thieneman, who you want to see kind of, especially when you're replacing a guy like Jeffrey Boss at middle linebacker, or you're replacing an experienced secondary where you had Tyshim Johnson and Kobe Savage as your safeties. Dylan Thieneman coming in, you want to see how quickly those guys are picking it up. Betcher, Devin Jackson, Gavin Nix looked really good at linebacker, but Thieneman at safety was already getting guys coordinated and into place. Those are the types of things that you want to see. I don't sit there and look at a spring game and say, yes, plant your flag in the ground on making sweeping judgments on anything. But I think you can be optimistic about that defensive line, especially that edge rushing room where Blake Purchase, Mateo Uiagalelei, Tatum Tuioti, Elijah Rushing, they're 4, 5, 6 deep at edge, and so it's going to kind of be that relentless pressure coming off the edge, and those guys are finally coming into their own. And then the wide receiver room, I was blown away by those guys. They're going to be pretty dang good there.
The national talking point right now is that Lanning's not going to go into the transfer portal to address what the national media is saying about the linebacker core.
No, and I think that coming out of it, coming out of the spring game, Betcher coming back is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Devin Jackson got significant run. I like both Jerry Mixon and Gavin Nix, who Mixon had gotten run last year. Nix is a highly touted linebacker coming out of high school that, I mean, he looks the part. They got a bunch of, that's the crazy part, is they look ready to go out of high school now. And that is wild to think about how large of humans some of these guys are. But one thing that was funny about the game was halftime. I got my questions with Coach Lanning, and one of the first words out of his mouth was, "I hope we don't have to punt again." Punting was an issue. And I think every coach, regardless of how the punts go, is probably wants to say, "I hope we don't have to punt." But that would have been, if you want to look at, okay, that didn't look good at all. That was the aspect of the game that was brutal. And for Lanning to say that, it was a good chuckle, but it was a joke, but also not great in that first half.
Need to find an Adley Rutschman on campus.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Ross James has got a boomer,
Yeah.
but and so does Luke Dunn, but they didn't have it on Saturday, and he acknowledged that during our halftime chat. But I don't think that they are going to go into the portal for linebacker. I think that they are comfortable with where they're at as a roster. There are still going to be questions, though, and like, this is the thing. When you lose 10 guys to the NFL draft, you have big shoes to fill. When you lose 17 guys ended up signing NFL contracts from your 10 drafted and the 7 undrafted free agents, that Oregon team was really damn talented. But this is what happens, right? This is why recruiting matters. These are why the stars matter. These are why your early portal guys, it matters so much to teams, is because you can get them into spring and then you can have that level of comfort. I wouldn't imagine that they're going to be very active in the portal after, it closed on Friday, because it's a bunch of guys that feel that they weren't going to get the run where they were at. And so that the spring portal is not where your top end teams in college football are going to get a bunch of starters out of.
So, all right, that's our spring report from Mr. Sideline Reporter himself.
Dude, it was a crazy environment, though. Star-studded, too. There was a lot of former NFL guys.
Yeah, you did Christian Gonzalez down there.
Christian Gonzalez.
Wasn't
Bucky Irving was the other guest coach, but Haloti Nada, LeGarrette Blunt, Jeremiah Johnson, Ed Dixon, Alex Molden was down on the sidelines, Chad Cota, Jackson Powers Johnson, Alex Forsyth. Like, there was a lot of the former players ended up coming back and showing face at the spring game. And look, that's the thing. You get 40,000 fans down there. You bring back the guys that have played in the NFL or play in the NFL. You use that as a recruiting weekend.
Absolutely.
And that's the main goal for them, is they had a bunch of highly touted prospects, including Jackson Cantwell, who's the number one prospect in the country right now. He's got a trip to Georgia coming up. Before he was going to commit yesterday, I think. And then he bumped that back because he wants to go to Georgia as well before he ends up making his commitment. But Oregon high on that list.
Give JPJ my love.
He was excited about Ashton Genty. Talked to him about Ashton Genty. He's pumped for it. He's pumped for Chip Kelly, and he's already given Chip a bunch of crap. But he's like, I still think he's a Duck at heart, And then Pete Carroll as his head coach, he's happy with the direction of the Raiders and where they're going.
That's always good to hear.